Loki is a dragon. That is the amazing reveal we get in this chapter as we see him soaring up from the depths of the underworld into the sun realm, bringing with him a storm of snow and powerful thunder, ready to show these invaders exactly why he believes he is Nika, the god of destruction. And with Luffy on his back and the drums of liberation announcing their arrival, these two sun gods are ready to show the devil exactly what happens when he crossed the giants. Alright, so despite Sommer's being a major part of this chapter, this was still a pretty great one. Might even end up being in my top 5 favorite chapters of this arc if we exclude the flashback, which I kinda count as its own little mini arc inside of this one. And that's because of the amount of raw emotion that scene of the parents with their kids brought out of me. Every now and then, Oda just decides, you know what? He's going to go ahead and punch us in the gut, and this was definitely one of those times. Because coming off the ending of the last chapter, where Somers, in an act to save himself, inadvertently ended up not only destroying their getaway ship, but also the sea clouds at the pier, basically ruining their entire plan. Which look, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, but Somers isn't entirely to blame here. Anyone would have reacted the same way he did with a giant monster getting ready to fall and crush them. It's completely reasonable that he swatted away, and it's just bad luck that it landed where it did. But Emu's not going to see it that way, which is exactly why he is so panicked at the start of this chapter, because he knows that he is basically now a dead man walking. Which is also why, for a second there, I actually thought we might see Somers working with the parents. You know, to unscrew his screw up, maybe by releasing the thorn so the parents could at least try and grab their kids and run in the other direction. Or maybe even using his thorn bat thing to try and stop the arrow so the kids would at least stay still for a bit until he could figure out a plan B. I mean, it wouldn't have worked though, because apparently the arrows are absolute. No matter how much force you put up against them, they're just going to keep on keeping on. But I'd at least thought he'd try something to save face in front of Emu, you know, to avoid becoming the next Saturn. I was wrong, because apparently his sadistic lust to see people and families suffer in the most tragic ways possible beats out everything else, including his fear of Emu. He even gets so delusional in his little euphoric episode that he actually thinks he can somehow shift the blame for this from himself onto Emu, and that Emu would actually fall for it. Honestly, it's probably the saddest thing in this entire chapter. Because what's going to happen is that Emu is going to put the blame entirely on him and open up a spot in the God's Knights for one of the new up-and-coming Blades of God, which I'm genuinely surprised hasn't already happened. I honestly don't know how Somers made it this long as a God's Knight, because we've seen firsthand that even back over 30 years ago, he was still this same screw-up who would willingly draw the plan or go against the goals of the God's Knights in order to seek out this thrill he gets from watching people suffer due to love. It's basically on the same level as Hisoka's obsession with fighting strong opponents that could possibly kill him, except Somers doesn't very visibly climax over the idea of seeing people suffer. Okay, well, he came very close in this chapter, because there is no non-orgasmic way to describe this face he's making right here in this panel. But don't let Somers' weird fetish distract from the real tragedy of this part of the chapter, that despite how much effort they put in, none of the giants here are even able to land a dent in the arrow, meaning that there's nothing that can stop the kids from walking right off the edge of the pier, falling to their deaths. Gets even more tragic when one of the parents say that if the kids fall, they won't even be able to find their bodies down there. And that was the start of the emotional spiral I went through in this chapter. The next part that hit me was with Voimo, because he was willing to sacrifice his own arms if it meant saving his grandkid. And what I really love about that scene is that it wasn't the pain that eventually made him let go. He was willing to accept that and whatever damage that came with it onto himself, if this desperate attempt had any chance of working. It was only after the thorn started hurting his grandson that he eventually stopped. Then Somers mockingly revealed that there was no stopping the arrow. Until it reached its programmed destination, it would keep the kids moving no matter what gets in its way. And what really made me sad was all the kids thinking that this was divine punishment for all the bad things they've done. Said bad things being simple things that every kid does, like refusing to eat food that they don't like or calling their parents scary when they're mad. Definitely not something worth losing their lives over. But to kids with such little life experience, those would be the things they think they're being punished for. And as they cry their hearts out in fear that they're going to die, promising that if they somehow survive, they'll go on to be good kids from now on, that's when we get to see Ripley followed by all the other adult giants there, hugging their kids as they walk over the edge. Choosing that if they can't save the little ones, then they can at least make sure that they don't die alone. And look, even after my third time reading the chapter, this scene still made me tear up a bit. Hell, I'm tearing up a bit just thinking about it right now. Especially with Johanna, who, because she's an orphan, didn't think she'd have anyone to comfort her in these final moments. Only for Anj, who we found out in the last chapter was on her way there, to arrive just in time to hug the young giant, letting her know that she's just as loved as the rest of the kids. We even have Ro jumping in at the very last second to die with his little brother, in my opinion, completely redeeming himself for the start of this arc. And of course, Ronya, the star of the storyline, still believing up until the very last second that somehow they'll be saved, with her dad grabbing her as they fall off, telling her that he's so proud of how brave she's been this entire time. All while Sommers, that monster that he is, laughs over the entire scene, thinking he just watched the exact kind of tragic love he gets off on, as the kids and their parents fall to their deaths. But that's not what happens. Instead, Ripley wakes up to Colin announcing that they somehow survived, having landed on Luffy, who had stretched himself out to catch their fall. The kids are still likely covered in thorns because Luffy complains about being poked, but now that they've reached the end of the pier, the arrow is gone, so the kids are basically free. And as the chapter comes to an end, we see that they landed on top of Loki in his full Zoan form, a giant dragon flying up to the Sun Realm, ready to save his home. And this reveal is exciting for two major reasons. One, the design for Loki's Zoan form is just simply amazing. I know that he'll likely be a similar purple to his actual hair color, since that is its defining color, just like how Zoro's is green, similar to how that dragon looked back on the cover of chapter 1128. In fact, I'm pretty sure now that that dragon is actually supposed to be Loki. But the pure black version we get in the chapter just looks so good. It's exactly the kind of menacing, destructive vision of a dragon that made me fall in love with the fantasy creature as a kid, and it might have just become my new favorite in the manga. And the second reason is because it kinda confirms a theory that I've had for a while now, that it wasn't Loki overpowering Ragnar that made the squirrel decide that he was worthy of eating the devil fruit, it was that he was the one Ragnar had been told to wait for, due to his eyes being that of a dragon's. I'm pretty sure that I mentioned this before, but when you look at Loki back when he was born, those cursed eyes, as Estrid called them, look very similar to the eyes dragons normally are shown to have, which I personally think was Oda's way of hinting to us exactly what Zoan form he was going to get, and is likely something that he shares with the previous user of the devil fruit. That's why no other king between then and now, including Harold, had ever been able to eat the fruit, because only those born with those eyes are meant to have it. Or at least that was the instruction the previous owner gave to Ragnar when it came to choosing its next wielder. Either that, or Ragnar themselves was waiting for someone that resembled that king to show up before allowing that person to eat the fruit. Either way, I really do believe those eyes are the key. And now that Loki has the fruit, is freed from his chains, and is ready to fight, the war for Elbaf has officially kicked off. And Emo will now not only have to come face to face with the new sun god, but also a very large dragon looking for revenge. It's going to be a long 2-week break before we get to the next chapter, but I am really looking forward to see where we go from here. But anyway, that is it for the video. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and let me know in the comments down below what you thought about the chapter.